Welcome, my friends, to another Walking Dead theory video. Okay, so my last Walking Dead video, where I talked about the possibility of Rick being a walker, you know, it was received pretty well. I hadn't made a video like that before, and I didn't know how my audience would react, and it was received pretty well. So you know what, I think I'm going to give it another go. I have maybe another outlandish theory, maybe not as outlandish as the Rick is a walker theory, but I guess we'll see. Okay, so today's video will be focused on many people's favourite character, Daryl.
It's not Daryl, it's Daryl. Please get that right.
And more specifically, how he will die. That is, of course, if he will ever in fact die on the show. I personally think right now, the showrunners won't let a single hair on Daryl's head get touched. You know, just out of fear of the viewer base rioting. But, you know, personally, I do think an end must come for most characters in this story. And I think if Daryl does die, they'll have to make Daryl's death a good one. You know, seeing as how he's a fan favourite and all-around badass. Okay, so let's just get to it. I have a theory that Rick will be the one to kill Daryl. That is right, Rick Grimes, and at this point pretty much brother to Daryl, will be the one to kill Daryl. But what could possibly lead Rick to having to kill Daryl? Well, to find this answer, we can look to this current season, Season 8. But before I continue, this video will contain spoilers for the Walking Dead show all the way up to this current episode, and it's going to include some comic book spoilers as well. So please, if you don't want the show or comics spoiled, get out while you can before it's too late. Okay, so first I want to take a look at Season 8, Episode 3, and I want to look at Daryl's cold-blooded actions in that episode. Okay, so the episode starts out with Daryl killing Morales. You know, in Episode 2, Morales had Rick captured, and then at the start of Episode 3, Daryl just straight up kills Morales. You know, just without hesitation, just straight up shooting him in the neck with his crossbow. You know, not even Rick was expecting this, you know, and Rick's reaction was one of shock and just pure disbelief. And, you know, Daryl he didn't really care. He just brushed it off. He's like, yeah, I knew who that was. You know, who cares? He just saw Morales as an obstacle in the way of the mission's success. And, you know, we've got to remember that Morales was a part of the original Atlanta group before even Rick joined the group. So this wasn't just a faceless foot soldier. At the very least, you know, it could have meant a little something to Daryl. But then, in that very same episode, after Rick and Daryl leave the building, Rick and Daryl come across a lone savior, and this savior claims to be a measly worker. He's not a fighter, he's just one of the workers at the compound. And, you know, we kind of get a short standoff with him. You know, Rick promises to let him go if he just lays down his weapons. He promises him a vehicle. Rick makes a statement saying that a man's word is the only thing left of value in this world. And, you know, the savior worker, he buys that, and he's confident that, you know, Rick's gonna let him go. So he comes out of cover, and what does Daryl do? You guessed it, he shoots him right in the face without hesitation. And again, Rick has this look of shock and disbelief on his face. I think he's realizing that they aren't necessarily the good guys in this. I mean, they're not the bad guys by any stretch, but they're not necessarily the good guys. It's many shades of grey, and it's not so black and white. You know, Daryl's actions in this episode, combined with Rick killing the father of the baby, then essentially kidnapping that baby, I think it's making Rick realise that they are doing some fucked up shit here. And it's definitely obvious that Rick is having some moral conflicts. You know, and to see some more evidence of Rick's moral conflicts here, we can look at Season 8, Episode 1, where Carl is trying to get Rick to show mercy. There's that lone survivor that him and Carl come across looking for gas. Rick makes him run away by shooting above his head because, you know, he's a stranger. Rick doesn't trust this person. And then later in that episode, towards the end, Carl ended up giving that person supplies, going back with an apology note and a bag. So, you know, we have this one character, Carl, who is incredibly close to Rick. Obviously, he's his son, so he's very close to Rick. And he's acting kind of like the angel on his shoulder right now. And then we have this other character, Daryl, who is, again, very close to Rick, almost like a brother to Rick at this point. They've been through so much together, and he's kind of acting like the devil on his shoulder. And we know, with all the things that has happened in the show, Rick is capable of showing great mercy and great wrath, especially when it comes to strangers. So it is definitely clear that Rick is having some moral conflicts here, and that has kind of been the theme of the whole season, really. We have a similar thing going on with Jesus and Morgan. They had that little fight in the woods. You know, Morgan wanted to kill. Jesus just wants to capture them because he doesn't think that we should kill unarmed people. And then we had a little bit of that between Gabriel and Negan, actually, in this episode. You know, the two of them were having a conversation and came to a bit of an understanding. Gabriel made Negan open up a bit, and it shows, you know, there's a few more shades of grey to this matter. So at this point, Rick kind of has to choose who he's going to follow. Will he follow the path of Carl or the path of Daryl? And, you know, I think he'll choose the path that Carl is currently on, the more forgiving. I think that's ultimately what is going to build this new world that we'll possibly see later on in the series. But of course, this doesn't end here. We need to get to the big conflict between the two. It is clear that Daryl hates the Saviors after what happened to Glenn. No matter if it is Negan himself or a measly worker, Daryl is going to kill them on sight. And if the comics are going to be followed, then Rick is going to capture Negan, not kill him, and he's going to capture him for 2 years after the end of All Out War, which honestly I mean, come on, Daryl is not going to like that. He's going to have a huge problem with keeping Negan alive. You know, Daryl is so focused on wiping out the Saviors that he doesn't even care if it's non-combative workers and families. You know, just families that live with the Saviors and they work for them in exchange for protection and shelter. Remember that the Saviors are the soldiers and the fighting force of the group, and we see this explained in the latest episode, in episode 5, where Dwight explains how they have to keep the workers on their side because the workers outnumber the Saviors by many, many people. So we can see a clear difference here between workers and Saviors at the fighting force, and I think that's purposely being done to show this kind of many shades of grey scenario going on. They're very much pushing the moral conflict and the moral divides in this season. But of course, again, Daryl does not care about this, and this is where the conflict between Rick and Daryl will begin, and this could be what possibly leads to the death of Daryl, and his death might be at the hands of Rick. So in the latest episode, episode 5, Rick and Daryl had a big disagreement on whether or not to blow a hole in the sanctuary and let the walkers flood in. I mean, it was a pretty good idea, not gonna lie. Daryl thought that this would force the Saviors to give up, to surrender, because, you know, they were not going to be able to possibly fight off the horde of walkers flooding in. And, you know, Rick disagreed with this plan. And again, he had a good point as well. He thought that it would lead to the deaths of innocent workers and families. And of course, Daryl did not care about this. He still wanted to go through with the plan. He was going to do it alone if he didn't have Rick's support. And this is where the fight between Rick and Daryl begun. And it got pretty aggressive. It started with a punch to the face, and then Daryl began choking Rick with a chokehold, which honestly, it's kind of funny because this was the move that Shane used on Daryl when Rick first met Daryl, so it's kind of a little nod back to season 1 there. There's been a few of those this season. So, I mean, yeah, Daryl straight up choked Rick. I don't know what would happen if the explosion didn't go off. Who knows how far Daryl would have taken it. It's definitely clear that Daryl was becoming a loose cannon when it comes to, you know, the Saviors and whether or not to kill them. And honestly, I don't think this is the last we'll see of the conflict between Rick and Daryl. I mean, they didn't necessarily end on good terms. They kind of just went their separate ways. We don't know where Daryl's going right now. Daryl might become so aggressive that, you know, Rick feels like he has to put him down. And, you know, it wouldn't be the first time Rick has had to do this. Of course, if we look back to season 2, Rick had to put Shane down. Shane was just becoming so out of control. And of course, at that point, Shane had become a bit of a psychopath, and a lot worse than Daryl currently is. You know, who is to say that Daryl won't get like this? He could get to Shane's level of just insanity, and then that could lead to his death at the hands of Rick. It could happen. But anyway, of course, this is a very outlandish theory, just like my last one. So of course, feel free to tell me if you hate this in the comments, just like with the last one. I'm open to all kinds of feedback, of course. I really appreciate the amount of feedback I got on my last theory, because it was my first ever theory video. And so to see the interaction, both good and bad, on that video was really great to see. So thank you guys for that. If you've watched that video and you're coming back to watch this one, great, thanks a lot. It really does mean a lot to me. But anyway, my friends, thank you for watching this video. If you like what you see, feel free to leave a like. And if you do want to see more, consider subscribing. Remember that your viewership is always appreciated, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.